Thanks everybody for joining us for our end of year webinar. It's been a fantastic 2019 and I am really excited for tonight's webinar. I think that the webinars are doing really well and I think it's a great way to get information out to people. And tonight we're going to go on an overview of the whole year. So perhaps you may have missed some of the webinars. Maybe you're new this evening. If you're not a dealer, you won't have been on these webinars. So we're going to go through all of the information over the year that we've been discussing with the dealers and make sure that everybody is up to date with all of the things we talk about. You know, here at DAC, we really take education very seriously, and I think it's a huge part of what sets DAC apart is that we try to keep everybody up to date, dealers, reps, on the latest information on all of these topics. So in January, we talked about winter feeding and the breeding horse because we're always trying to get ahead of the curve. And so I know we're not breeding horses. A lot of people aren't breeding right in January, but we need to make sure that we're ahead of the curve. February, we went on to discuss growing horses. Now in March, we don't do a webinar because we hope everybody joins us for DAC Days. And at the end, I'll give you the dates for that because it really is a fantastic event if you can make it. So March and April, we'll do a DAC Days recap. May, we talked about joint health because, you know, people are getting ready for that summer circuit and that summer season, and they're going to start thinking about perhaps needing a joint supplement. We introduced some new ingredients into our supplements this year, and so we'll give you an overview on our new calcium supplement that we're incorporating in the Cool Gut and in the Colt Grow. You know, July, we're starting to get into those hot months, so we discussed a little bit about electrolytes and what perhaps sets the DAC electrolyte apart. And if you're shopping for electrolytes, what should you be looking for? August, we've gone through a really tough show season and we're coming out the other end. We've probably trailered our horses a lot. We've gone to a lot of shows. Maybe our horse has a little chronic diarrhea going on. We're just concerned about their gut health because they've gone through a lot of stress. So we really looked at the microbiome, which is really gut health. September, we start thinking about the winter is coming up and do I have enough hay supply? So what do I do? Are there supplements that can help improve the usage of the hay that I'm feeding? In October, we talked about a new product that we have been developing, and we hope to have that fully finalized by DAC Days of 2020, but we're developing that product and doing research on currently. November, winter preparation again. You know, we're getting ahead of the curve, and then in December, obviously, we're wrapping it all up. And of course, we hope that everybody can ask questions at the end, but we probably won't have, and you know, we've got a lot of callers on tonight, and I'm just over the moon at the amount of people that have logged on. So we probably won't have time for everybody's questions, but I'll put my email address up, my phone number, and you know that you can contact me anytime. That is a big part of the service that Performance Horse Nutrition supplies to DAC. So we'll get started. So we started out the year talking about winter and breeding, and really we started out talking about that winter feeding, and I thought it was really important to talk about, you know, what does determine cold temperatures? When do we have to start thinking, wow, do we need to feed extra to our horses? What are these temperatures like? So we in the industry we use this term called lower critical temperature, or LCT, and it's the temperature below which metabolic heat production, that's the heat production produced in the body of the horse, must be increased to maintain body temperature. So if we have our mature horse, the lower critical temperature is between 5 degrees Fahrenheit and 41 degrees Fahrenheit. All right? And so obviously we know I grew up in Australia. I do not like the cold and I don't tolerate the cold very well. Horses are the same. Horses that are living in a warmer climate and aren't used to a colder climate, their lower critical temperature is much higher than for horses that are adapted to that cold weather. So horses with a thin coat or adapted to warmer climates, once the temperature gets below 41 degrees Fahrenheit, then we have to consider adding more nutrition to them so that they can maintain their body heat. If they're not maintaining their body heat, they're going to start shivering, and they're going to use the calories that you're feeding them to maintain body weight to actually maintain body temperature. So horses will start to lose weight at these temperatures if they're not supplemented enough. Horses with a thick coat that are adjusted to these colder temperatures, it can be down as low as 5 degrees Fahrenheit before we have to start adding additional forage. Young horses, that lower critical temperature is a little higher, so between 12 and 32 degrees Fahrenheit. For each decrease in coldness of 1 degree below that critical temperature, there's an increase in the energy requirements to maintain our body temperature and maintain our our body weight. So you can see here, I've broken it down to the amount of energy in hay. And so most of our really good quality hay has about 1 megacal of energy per pound. And so if the critical temperature is right in that normal range, above 41 or 5, depending on where you live, then you don't need to increase your feed or forage above that, 15 to 25 pounds a day. But if we get below that, say 10 degrees below that, then we're going to have to increase by about 2 pounds of hay per day. 20 degrees below that lower critical temperature, and we're increasing it by about 4 pounds a day. You can see when we're getting those really cold temperatures, 40 to 40 degrees below that lower critical temperature, we're having to add about 8 pounds more of fiber to make them maintain their body weight. Now, when you add cold and wind, it really significantly increases their hay requirement. So we've got an average temperature of about 32 degrees Fahrenheit, so that's freezing, and you add 10 to 15 mile an hour winds, then you have to increase the amount of hay you're giving your horses by about 4 to 8 pounds. 32 degrees and it's raining, about 6 pounds. Add about 6 pounds of hay additional a day for them to maintain their body weight. And rain and wind, we're looking at adding, it could be double the amount of hay, because when those bacteria in the hindgut are breaking down that fiber, they're creating heat and they're helping keep that horse warm, and there's calories that you're getting out of that hay that are helping keep the horse warm. So they're just some rough ideas of, as the temperatures fall, how much extra hay do we need to feed per day, and if it's windy or raining, do we need to add extra? And yes, we do. So that's what we touched on with winter feeding. Then we went over and we said, okay, well, we've got some stallions or some mares, and depending on the discipline or the breed that you have, we really need to start thinking about nutrition for the breeding horse. So omega-3 fatty acids are absolutely critical when it comes to mare and stallion reproductive health. And we've talked about in the past that there are actually 3 different omega-3 fatty acids. There's ALA, which comes from chia and hemp and flax and your other plant forms, but really all that gives your horses a source of energy and a little fiber. But what the horse actually uses for brain and eye and reproductive function and reducing inflammation is the DHA and EPA. Now, the conversion, ALA can be converted to DHA and EPA, but that conversion is really, really poor. So we want to feed direct sources of DHA and EPA, and you're going to get those from your marine sources like algae or fish oil. So fish actually get their DHA, their omega-3s, from algae. So we bypass all of the fish because it tastes pretty bad for horses, and we go directly to algal sources of omega-3 fatty acids. And now there's a lot of research that has been conducted on stallion reproductive health with horses, supplementing them with DHA and EPA omega-3 fatty acids. Well, if we just look at exercise, we can see that during exercise, these horses have a much lower heart rate compared to their controls, compared to horses not being supplemented with this DHA and EPA. They have better recovery after exercise. It also helps with horses with airway, pulmonary inflammation, so bleeders or any other kind of respiratory disorder, improves cooled and frozen semen motility characteristics, and it also improves inflammation. So any inflammatory disease or even just day-to-day exercise increases inflammation in horses. So adding a DHA supplement is really beneficial. And we have the Breeders Excel. So with breeding stallions, we want to feed 6 weeks prior to the breeding season. You need to start feeding this high omega-3 fatty acid supplement, and it improves semen quality. And with mares, again, we still want to start feeding them the supplement 60 days prior to the breeding season, and it'll improve oocyte or egg quality and decrease uterine inflammation, and that can help improve reproductive health. So you can see here in our little chart, for those of you that can see. Now, all of you will have access to these slides after this presentation. If you're a phone caller, make sure that you get with your rep and they will make sure that you get them. So as far as total sperm, sperm count, motility, and the morphology or the shape of those sperm, when they're supplemented with DHA, all of these characteristics are significantly better. So we have our first winner, and that is Jennifer McMaster. So Jennifer, please go ahead and email Tina at feeddac.com because you are our first t-shirt winner. So then we moved on to February. And in February, we're starting to get some foals on the ground, and we want to make sure that we're going to be feeding and supplementing these young growing foals because we're really developing future equine athletes. You know, I have seen so many horses that are still healthy and active into their late 20s and some even into their early 30s. So these horses are living a long time, and it's our responsibility when we're breeding and growing these babies to set them off for a lifetime of success. So we need to make sure that in these early days, we know what's going on. We know there's rapid skeletal growth. We know that minerals are being deposited in the bone. And if we have poor uptake of these nutrients, we're going to have a poor skeleton. Mare's nutrition is absolutely key to foal health. So even way before this, before you even take your mare to the breeding shed, you need to make sure she's on an ample vitamin and mineral supplement so that she is going to be able to develop the best embryo and the best fetus possible. But when we look at foal nutrition, we really focus on calcium and phosphorus primarily as we call them macro minerals. These are minerals that are needed in higher quantities. And then our trace minerals needed in smaller quantities are copper, manganese, and zinc. All of you are probably familiar with the Colt Grower, which is our daily vitamin and mineral supplement for young growing horses. Start them at 3 months of age on this and grow most horses through 2 years of age. Later maturers or heavier boned horses grow them through 3 years of age. And if you're concerned about any kind of joint issue, then you would start them at about 30 days of age on this. The CMZ Colt Builder paste, which actually CMZ literally just stands for copper, manganese, and zinc, is a therapeutic product that is fed at really high concentrations of those minerals for short periods of time. So then we moved on to DAC Days, and as I've mentioned before, DAC Days is a fantastic opportunity to network with other dealers, to hear about new products, to listen to great speakers, and really just overall be around a great group of people. If you want to really grow your DAC business, then I implore all of you to try and make it to DAC Days, because I don't know of a single person that has come to DAC Days and hasn't just been really overwhelmed by all of the great information and hasn't gone home and grown their business. So one of the first things I talked about in my presentation was the updates that we made. And so we improved the DAC Bloom. You know, a lot of people were feeding it as a protein supplement, but we wanted to really improve the quality of the protein. So you can see on the left-hand side, we had a guaranteed analysis, and we just listed crude protein, and we had lysine and methionine, which are amino acids. They were listed. But now you can see in the tag that we've bumped up the amount of lysine. We've improved that from 1.45% up to 2%, so significantly improved that. But now we've also got a whole slew of other amino acids that are contributing to that muscle development and overall health of the horses: phenylalanine, isoleucine, tryptophan, glycine, valine, leucine, histidine, biotin is actually a B vitamin, but all of these are actually contributing to it being more of that bodybuilder supplement, improving that coat and hair quality and hoof quality that we've always wanted. So that was one of the changes that we made. We also, we just talked about the Breeders Excel and how it's great for those breeding horses, but we had a bit of an issue with our previous formulation with palatability. And that's one thing that I'm really proud of with our work with DAC vitamins and minerals is that, we bring out new products and we listen to the feedback from the dealers and from the customers. And if it's not perfect, then we will change it. And the feedback we were getting was that we struggled with some palatability with some of these horses. So we actually changed the formula and we added some more vitamin E. We added some more palatability agents. While still maintaining really high levels of DHA. So this is a much more palatable product. And, we've got testimonials from customers using this product that have, what they thought was a stallion that just was not going to be useful as a breeding stallion anymore. And they've put them on this product and now they're able to use him again. So, there's great testimonials. Just reach out to your reps for those. We were also, as I mentioned, listening to the consumers. We heard people were really after a liquid joint supplement. I've never been a huge proponent of feeding a joint supplement to young growing horses or those young horses starting out their career and just doing a little exercise. I was more of okay, your horse is 15 to 20 years old and they've got active osteoarthritis, so we're going to go with something like Optimum Flex Plus. But since we came out with this liquid joint supplement, it's really concentrated hyaluronic acid. We call it the LQHA plus. It's got a little glucosamine in it as well. As I mentioned, really high doses of that hyaluronic acid. Now, hyaluronic acid is really important for those synovial fluids, those lubricated joints. We're going to talk about this more when we get into the joint month, but just know that, with these young horses, we really, especially when you're starting to work them more, we really are advocating that they're on a liquid joint this hyaluronic acid supplement just to help with the wear and tear that's going to go on in those joints. Oops. We also had the DAC Pasture Lick. We rolled that out at DAC Days. It's a 60-pound tub. It's primarily for those horses that are not currently getting supplemented, not feeding them every day. If you're bringing horses into stalls and you're currently feeding them a vitamin mineral supplement like the Orange or the Total Performance, then we don't recommend that you put this tub out in the paddock and stop feeding them. If you're already bringing broodmares in and feeding them Breeder's Choice or Orange, then keep doing that. But if you've got groups of horses that are currently not getting supplementation and you'd like to give them something, but it's just not convenient to manage them intensively every day, then this lick tub is really ideal. And we put all the bells and whistles in it, 100% chelates. We put biomoss in there, which binds bad bacteria and improves gut health. We put the live cell yeast culture in there, digestive enzymes. But like any of our equine supplements, we really don't advocate you feed these to sheep because they're high in copper, and that is not great for sheep. We also rolled out the vitamin E supplement, and the vitamin E. Who really needs the vitamin E supplement? The DAC E Natural, it's called, and really I go back to who doesn't need it. There are very few horses that don't need a vitamin E supplement. Vitamin E comes from fresh green grass, and most of our horses don't have 17 hours out of the day that they're consuming fresh green grass, so they really do need to have a vitamin E supplement. In hay, vitamin E is gone from the hay within about 1 to 2 weeks of cutting it. So again, it's really, really important that we're supplementing our horses with vitamin E. And people say, well, what am I going to be noticing in my horse? Why would I think that they're deficient in vitamin E? Well, number one, most horses are deficient because they're not eating a lot of fresh green grass. It is a great supplement, a great vitamin that you can actually test for in the blood, so you can get a blood test. But, you know, stabled horses, horses with poor pasture, any kind of drought, exercising horses. Exercise utilizes a lot of vitamin E. Horses that have muscle soreness, chronic muscle soreness, uneven gait, top line. So look at this horse in the graphic here in the picture. You know, this horse is getting fed plenty of feed. He's getting exercise. He's not a nice shiny coat, but he just lacks top line, right? His hindquarter, his shoulder, over the top of his neck, up around over his withers, he's just lacking top line. And it just has uneven muscle development. You can just see over his hindquarter, it's just really weak. Sometimes they'll drag a toe as well or chronically be shifting their weight. Thin horses, broodmare stallions, all of these horses can benefit from vitamin E. And it comes in a 1 and a 5 pound tub, and it's very highly concentrated. And I've compared it with other supplements on the market, and it really is one of the less expensive. So we moved on to May and we started talking about joint supplements because, as you know, we're getting into the showing season, and a lot of people are asking me whether they should be adding a joint supplement, etc. And so I just broke it down, and there are really 3 different types of joints. We've got the synovial joints. These are movable joints, like your knee. There's synovial fluid in those joints that acts as a buffer. It's lubrication in that joint, and we need to make sure that we maintain adequate amounts of lubrication so that that cartilage doesn't get worn away. These joints are the most prone to damage because we've got the most going on in them. We've got the most activity. Then we've got these cartilaginous joints. They're slightly movable, and there's lots of different cartilage types. These you would find, say, in the joints between your vertebrae. So yes, your spinal cord moves, but it certainly doesn't move like your elbow or your knee. And so there's no viscous material in these joints. It's just cartilage buffering, big chunks of cartilage sitting between those vertebrae joints. And then we have fibrous joints. These don't move. It's when fibrous tissue hardens with age. So any of you that have seen a baby's skull, you know, you have that big empty hole in the middle of it, and their skull, so that they can come out through the birth canal and so that they can move, those joints are really fibrous. And as those joints age, those fibrous tissues get harder and harder and harder. So these don't move either, and so there's really never a lot of damage in these joints. So we're really focusing on those synovial joints. Where are the key synovial joints in the horse? The stifle, the hock, the fetlock, the knee, the pastern. And again, what we're seeing in here, so if we look at our graphic on the right-hand side, you can see, so we've got the 2 bones coming into the joint, and then on the ends of those bones, we've got articular cartilage, and then we've got a joint capsule around this joint, right? And that joint capsule, right inside that joint capsule, we've got the synovial membrane, and that's going to hold that fluid in. That's kind of that inner layer that holds that fluid in. And right inside in the green there, that's the synovial fluid. And that's got to stay lubricated so that that cartilage can stay hydrated and stay nourished so that it stays intact and we don't have wear and tear on those joints. So as I mentioned, these are the ones that are most actively damaged. And so in the new LQHA Plus, it's primarily hyaluronic acid. Hyaluronic acid decreases inflammation and really can be beneficial in these joints that suffer from these inflammatory markers. Now, when do we use the Optimum Flex Plus, for example? So I use the hyaluronic acid on the younger horses, so probably 10 and below. But above that, then especially if this horse has been doing a lot of exercise, then we have osteoarthritis occurring, and we've started to see, you know, inflammation has occurred in these joints, and we've got bone cysts, and maybe we've got some of that calcified cartilage is dropping off and causing a lot of damage in that joint. And that's where we would go to something like the Optimum Flex Plus. And you can see here from our graphic, you know, inflammation is the root of all joint disorders. And inflammation is what we can calm down by using the LQHA. So in those young horses where inflammation is occurring because you're doing exercise, use the liquid joint supplement. And that's going to slow the progression of any joint disease. So it's going to slow the time before you're going to have to use that Optimum Flex Plus. So we have a second t-shirt winner, and that's Joe Ray Richardson. And so Joe Ray, if you can email Tina, that is going to be at tina@feeddac.com, and let her know your t-shirt size, and she'll get that out to you. So in June we thought we'd talk about this novel calcium source that we started putting in the Cool Gut and in the Cult Grower, and I'll give you the reasoning why we chose those two supplements to put it in. So typical calcium source that people use in feeds and supplements is calcium carbonate or limestone. And it's just got a solid surface, and so it's a little difficult for it to be absorbed and for acid to attack at it, because calcium, we know, is a really good buffer, and it helps to buffer acid, especially in the stomach. So we started looking for alternative sources that are more bioavailable, because we don't have a chelated source of calcium per se, but we do want to have really bioavailable sources. So we found this product called lithothamnium, but its registered name that we utilize on the ingredients list is CALCITE. It's a natural marine ingredient made from fossilized red algae. It's rich in minerals, and it has really high antacid or buffering properties. So if you can see here, I talked about that calcium carbonate being a solid structure. Look at the calcite though. This is under a microscope. It's got a honeycomb structure. So it's just got a lot more surface area for the acid to attack and for enzymes to attack it so that it can be absorbed. There's been a lot of research looking at this calcite product, this type of calcium, in horses with ulcers. So this was a study done looking at 10 horses, ranges in ages and sex, and on day 0, they ranked their ulcer scores. So we rank ulcer scores from 0 to 4, and these horses had between a 1 to 3 ulcer grade. So some of them quite significant ulcers. And then by day 30 of feeding this supplement, 100% of the horses had significantly reduced ulcer scores. 70% of the horses had an ulcer score of 0 after 30 days. That is really significant. One of the horses that had an ulcer score of 3 at the beginning, after 30 days, had an ulcer score of 0. So that's really significant. It really has really good buffering properties. We also know that because it's so bioavailable and so absorbable, where else do we use calcium? Bone health, and especially in young growing horses. So osteocalcin is one of these bone remodeling. So when we take that cartilage and we want to turn it into bone, that's what happens in these juvenile animals, we need osteocalcin. These are bone building cells. And so the blue bars represent calcium carbonate, horses supplemented with the typical calcium source, and the red bars represent those horses supplemented with this novel form of calcium. And you can see the horses supplemented with this new type of calcium, they had much higher bone building cells. So that's really, really important. These horses here, now we're looking at bone density and exercising young thoroughbreds that were pre-training, and their bone density on 2 different surfaces of the bone, their bone density was significantly higher after 30 and 90 days on this calcium supplement. So I also need you all, anybody who's having a watch party in their home or in a location, so you've got several guests with you watching, if you can email Tina with the amount of guests and their names, that would be fantastic, so that we make sure that we put you all in the drawing. Again, that's tina@feeddac.com. Anyone who's having a watch party, let her know who you've got there. Also, if you can take a photograph of your group, that's even better. So we also put the calcite in the Cool Gut. And you can see it in the ingredients list. You can see it there at that first ingredient. You can see calcite written there. In the cool gut, because we really are trying to buffer that stomach acid. And we also put it in the cult grower. You can see it here as the first ingredient in the ingredients list because we need those young growing foals to be getting access to this phenomenal source of calcium that's going to really help their bones build. So our third t-shirt winner is Christina Thomas. Christina Thomas, if you can email tina@feeddeck.com and let her know your t-shirt size, she will get you a t-shirt. So July, it's starting to get hot and we're thinking about electrolyte supplementation, and we want to know, should we be feeding an electrolyte? And if so, what should we be adding to that electrolyte supplement? What should be the main ingredients? So the process of sweating in a horse causes a decrease in core temperature through evaporative cooling. So when the horse sweats, as that liquid is evaporating off the skin surface, it cools the horse down. It's a really excellent way for them to dissipate heat. But when they do that, that sweat that comes out of the body contains a lot of minerals, these electrolyte salts. So major electrolytes lost in sweat include sodium, chloride, potassium, calcium, and magnesium. Now, a lot of people think about sodium and chloride, which sodium and chloride make salt, and they think about potassium, but not a lot of people think about calcium and magnesium. Muscle cramps, uncoordinated behavior, so they're getting a bit wobbly, impaired nerve function, maybe they're twitching, not having great brain function, maybe your horse has started to get really nervous. But the other thing when these horses, so these are symptoms of a lack of electrolytes or overheating. Another thing is when horses get overheated, it actually decreases their thirst response. So it works very negatively. The first thing you want your horse to do is drink, but this lack of electrolytes and overheating actually decreases their thirst response. So you really need to make sure that you don't let them overheat and that you keep them up with their electrolytes. So you want to supplement electrolytes shortly before, during, and after exercise. I don't like to add it to the water bucket because that means they have to consume a whole bucket of water to get their electrolyte allotment. So if you're concerned about, are they eating it off their grain or whatever, then a paste is ideal. You can put it in their mouth and then they're getting all of it. Sodium and chloride, so salt, should be the primary ingredients, not sugar. By adding a lot of sugar to these electrolytes, you do increase the palatability, but you also decrease the uptake of these electrolyte salts. So it kind of works counterproductively. Supplement daily during work, discontinue during training breaks, unless it's really, really hot in the weather and the horse is still sweating a lot. Don't be afraid to feed electrolytes in the wintertime. If you're still exercising your horse a lot in the wintertime and they're sweating, you need to be supplying them with electrolytes. The DAC electrolyte has no sugar in it, so it's a really ideal. Todd Rydell, I think I said that right. You are getting our first hat. So if you want to email Rydell, maybe that's how you say it. If you want to email Tina, she'll get that hat out to you. So in August, we talked about the gut health and the gut microbiome, and this is something that I really find fascinating. And we know that horses are non-ruminant, so they're not cows. They have a hind-gut, not a foregut. But their gut is designed for them to ferment a bunch of different types of fibers, a wide variety of plant species. They're out. You can see in that photograph, look, there's just all different types of forages that they're eating. That hindgut contains a whole slew of different microbes and yeasts and bacteria and protozoa that are breaking down fiber, high and low quality fiber. So what is this term microbiome? Because, we hear all these new terms, and really the microbiome is nothing new, just a new way of categorizing that hindgut microbial population. So a microbiome is a community of microorganisms living together in a particular habitat. Humans, animals, and plants have their own unique microbiome. The equine gut microbiome refers to all of the microbes in the hindgut. Research has said this is so important that it actually acts as a whole nother organ. So we talk about heart health and lung health and liver and kidney, but the bacteria that live in the horse's hindgut They have so much influence on the horse's health that we consider that whole microbiome as another organ. And so what does that microbiome do? Well, it harvests nutrients, it extracts energy from the diet, it resists the colonization of pathogens, developing the immune system, detoxifying other toxic compounds in the host. What does it consist of? Bacteria, fungi, protozoa, yeasts, archaea, all these different small microbes. So we know that we've got a lot of cells in our body, right? From the tips of your fingers to the tips of your toes, you're made up of cells. Well, the amount of microbes in our body outnumber our cells by 10 to 1. So you've just got so many microbes in your body. And there are so many things that can affect this hindgut microbial population. The lifestyle of your horse, where are you keeping them? The environment, is it really hot? Is it cold? Dietary patterns, do your horses get out to pasture, or are they stuck in stalls and they're reliant on you for hay requirements? Do they have some kind of underlying gastrointestinal disease? Do they suffer from colic often? Changing the diet can affect these horses. Hindgut acidity, because you're feeding them a lot of grains and not a lot of forage. Laminitis can affect the gut microbial population, and then colic. Now, the microbes in the hindgut can cause colic, but if a horse gets colic from another reason, maybe they had a bad weed or something, then that can also affect the hindgut microbiome. So it really is affected by so many things, but it can also have an effect on so many things in the body. So when we think about feeding the hindgut microbiome, number one, we think about high quality forage, consistently provided, and we need to favor management practices that favor that microbiome, that feed that microbiome. So that's where we come into our digestive health supplements, pre and probiotics, DAC digestive feed additive, or the DDA, the probiotic paste, the rescue aid, the cool gut. These are all going to help that hindgut microbiome. The microbiome is affected daily. That's why I say every horse every day should be on the DDA, because it is a daily gut health supplement, and daily we're attacking the microbiome. So our fifth drawing is a t-shirt that goes to Amanda Boddingheimer. Now, I may have butchered that, but Amanda, if you can email Tina at tina@feeddac.com, she'll get you your t-shirt. So in September, we wanted to discuss hay shortage, right? Every year we say it's a bad year for hay, it's a bad year for hay. So what does that mean? And how much hay do our horses actually need? What do we need to supply our horses with to get them through the winter? So absolute bare minimum amount of hay that a horse needs to consume per day, or fiber, and especially if they're not eating grass, this all lands on your shoulders, is 1% of body weight. Now, that's just going to keep the gut functioning, right? They're probably going to lose weight, get gastric ulcers, get all kinds of other issues, but that will just keep the gut moving. That'd be about 10 pounds of forage for that 1,000-pound horse. If I have fat horses, I put them on a weight loss program, about 1.2% of body weight, 12 pounds. That's for a short period of time. I get that weight off them, and then I start to feed them more forage. I typically like our horses to eat between 1.5 to 2.5% of body weight, though. That's 15 to 25 pounds of forage per day. Now, know that the less forage you feed, the more intensely you have to manage these horses. So what happens if you don't feed enough forage to your horse? Well, we get a lot of acidity in the hindgut, which causes hindgut ulcers, colic. I rarely hear of cases of colic in barns where horses are getting plenty of fiber and plenty of hay. We develop gastric ulcers and cribbing or weaving, or these stereotypic behaviors. They start to chew wood because they're trying to produce that saliva that they would have been producing if they were chewing hay. And then these behavioral issues. I was just recently in a barn, and it was so quiet. And it was right before feeding time. And I noticed every stall had a huge hay bag. It was full of hay. And and the horses were just really calm, and they were just nibbling away, and there was just no stress there. So make sure your horses have plenty of fiber. I really don't want them to be without forage for more than 2 hours. So going through the winter, how much do we need? Well, if we go on 2% of body weight, that's about 20 pounds per day. And I've calculated most of us have about 5 months of winter where there's just no grass available. So that's about 150 days. So if we calculate 20 pounds a day for 150 days, that's about 3,000 pounds of hay that we need to stockpile, or a ton and a half per horse. Most of us have more than one horse. So this is a significant amount of hay that we need to find. And sometimes the only hay that we can find is not that high in nutritional value. So how do we get the most bang for your buck out of it? Well, there's also different forms of forage. We've got conventional baled hay, we've got compressed bales, forage cubes, forage pellets, chopped forage. There's really no nutritional difference between the different forms. Unless, for example, you start to put, sometimes the chopped forage has oil or molasses on it, but really there's not a lot of nutritional difference. You can supplement your long stem hay with a process, what I call a processed forage product, like a pellet or a cube, to either improve the quality or to extend the lifespan of your forage. Because if I say you've got to feed 20 pounds of hay per day, but you work out, I've only got enough hay that it will last me if I feed 10 pounds of hay a day, then we've got to find another 10 pounds of fiber. So 5 pounds of pellets, 5 pounds of chopped forage to add up to, 20 pounds there. What can we do to improve the digestibility of hay? Because even the very best quality hay is only 50% digestible. So yeast, adding a daily supplement that contains the yeast will improve fiber digestibility. And if you can get more out of the hay that you're feeding, that's going to go a long way to improving, decreasing your feed bills, decreasing your vet bills, because you won't have the vet coming out for digestive upset. Yeast and biomass really help us negate feeding changes, because we know that, we run out of hay, or we're changing hay supply, and just changing the hay is a feeding change. So that can be a big deal. Integral will bind mycotoxin. We put the integral and the yeast and the biomass in that digestive feed additive, the DDA. And so depending on where your hay was cut from, then it may have mold in it, mycotoxins that you just don't even see. And then the vitamin E found in grass must be supplied if we're feeding just shedded stored hay. So, our digestive supplements and our vitamin E are really important to add when our horses are on just hay. So, Dawn Mac wins a hat. That's our 6th drawing. So Dawn, if you want to email Tina, then at tina@feeddac.com, she will get your hat to you. So in October, we started talking about a new product that we're developing called PREBUFF. And it's a buffering supplement, and you will see it in the latest rendition of the catalog. Any of you that were at the American Quarter Horse Congress, you may have seen our ads for it there. But we really are still developing this product. We want to make sure it's the perfect product for you. And so what was the premise behind this is, what is an acid? What are we trying to combat? When I talk about acid in the horse's stomach, what is it? And if we go back to biochemistry, acids, they really sting when you stick your finger in them, but there's protons, ions, positives and negatives, and they're going to give away protons. Okay, this is a lot more than you need this late at night. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we have basic substances. So acids like lemon juice. On the other end of the spectrum, we have base, which is like soap or ammonia chloride, for example. And these will accept protons. So acids give them away, and bases accept them. pH, so we measure body weight in pounds, we measure energy in megacalories, we measure acidity with a unit called pH. And a buffer, what is a buffer? A buffer is a solution which you add to an acid or a base, and it will change the pH, the amount you want, and it will hold it there. So what we want to do is we want to take the stomach acid and we want to put a buffering solution in there, and we want to change the acidity and decrease the acidity, and we want to hold it throughout the day. And that's the premise behind the PREBUFF. And so you can see, as you're exercising horses, the pressure on the stomach increases. That's that top dark line. It increases when you walk, trot, can, or do hill work. The pressure, the actual physical muscular pressure on the stomach increases. And what that does is it pushes on the stomach. And in the bottom of the stomach, we've got this really strong acid, pH of 1 to 2. And as we move up into the stomach, that acidity decreases. But when you push on it, you squeeze it all up. And that really strong acid then splashes up onto the top section of the stomach, causing gastric ulcers. Now, I want to show you how quickly we can change the pH of the horse's stomach. So if you have a horse out and you let them have 24-hour access to forage, then this is what the acid values are going to look like in their stomach. For 24 hours, when they're just chewing away on grass and eating and drinking plenty of water, the acidity in their stomach is above a 4. It's going to run right up there, up to the 7. 7 is what water's pH is, right? So that's good. But what happens when we take these horses into a more unnatural situation and we take away the hay for 24 hours, what happens is within just 1 hour of removing the hay from these horses, the stomach acid hits rock bottom. It's between a 1 and a 2. That's really strong acid. And if you leave it there and don't let them eat anything, after 18 hours, they're going to have significant bleeding lesions. That's ulcers. But it takes only as little as 6 hours for us to have increased inflammation and reddening of that stomach lining. Remember back to the joint slide, and I said inflammation is the root of all bad things? Same in the stomach. Right? You're gonna have inflammation, and then that inflammation is gonna wear away at that stomach lining, and that's how we're gonna get ulcers. But what's not uncommon, especially this time of year, it's getting dark early, and we all just want to get inside, get out of the cold, get out of the dark. So we might have our night feed between 5 and 6 p.m., and our horses might be done everything by 7. It takes as little as 30 minutes for the food to pass through their stomach. And we may not be going out there till 6, 7 o'clock in the next morning. That's an 11 to 12-hour window where our horses don't have anything to eat. So it's really easy for horses to develop gastric ulcers. But the premise behind the PREBUFF is I wanted you to be able to feed something the day of an event or the day of a stressful event, and it's going to immediately buffer that stomach acid, and it's going to hold it for an extended period of time, 4 to 8 hours, depending on the length of your show. It's not something that you're going to feed every day. If you do worry about your horses having gastric ulcers, then I absolutely recommend that you feed the Cool Gut. Now I'll go back to another product that we are using that novel form of calcium in is the PREBUFF. And so there are 3 different ingredients that people will use in these buffering type products. Sodium bicarbonate is one ingredient, and this little graphic here just shows you kind of the buffering capacity of these different individual ingredients. So if you look at this soccer field here, you can see that sodium bicarbonate has the buffering capacity of about the goal on the end, right? And then calcium carbonate, that's that limestone we were talking about. It has the same buffering capacity of like that little circle in the middle. But the CALCITE powder or the CALCITE that we use, because of that surface area, it can buff. It has such a great surface area that its buffering capacity kind of covers the whole field. So you can see it's really, really great at buffering. So the other ingredients that we put in this product are magnesium. Magnesium is also an excellent buffer. It buffers and neutralizes excess acid in the digestive system. The best source, the most bioavailable source, is magnesium oxide. We also put threonine into the PREBUFF. It's an essential amino acid, and it really helps with tissue, and it helps to form that mucus layer on the gut lining. So that's really, really important. But as I said, this is ongoing. We're doing some university research trials right now with this product. So when to use the PREBUFF versus the cool gut. PREBUFF, right when you're doing that stressful event, trailering, going to a show, it buffers the stomach acid using that magnesium and calcite. The threonine helps with the mucus in the stomach, but it won't help with tissue health. It's going to buffer that stomach acid. The cool gut, though, it's going to buffer the stomach acid and the hindgut acid, but it's also going to help that tissue. So in November, we're back to thinking about winter preparation. And one of the big things, if we're ahead of time, is talking about weight gain. But before we get into that, we've got another drawing. Patty Edwards wins a t-shirt. So Patty, if you want to email Tina at tina@feeddeck.com and give her your shirt size and where to mail your t-shirt, she can get that out to you. So weight gain. If we want to put about 40 pounds of gain on a horse, we can safely do that in about 60 days. So that's why I start talking about this in October, November, is we have that 2-month window before it really gets cold in most of our areas to get ahead of that lower critical temperature that we talked about in January. Because, once the temperatures get lower, it's much, much harder to put body weight on a horse. We're really having to feed them a lot, and it's really hard to actually get enough calories into them to maintain their body temperature, let alone gain any weight. So we want to be prepared. We want to be ahead of the curve, and we've got about 60 days that we can do this. So on the left-hand side, what I've got here are typical ingredients that people use for weight gain: oats, rice bran, beet pulp, alfalfa, hay, and oil. And then in the middle column there, it's the amount of calories per pound in these. So the higher that number, the higher the amount of energy, the higher the amount of weight building that we can get out of that ingredient. So, let's just say we're feeding, 5 pounds of grain and about 15 pounds of hay, and we want our horse to gain weight. On top of what we're currently feeding them, if we chose oats, we'd have to feed about 4.5 pounds of oats a day. If we like to feed rice bran, about 4.5 pounds of rice bran. Beet pulp, slightly less calorie dense, so about 5 pounds of beet pulp. Now that's dry, so you're going to wet it. So we're looking at 10 to 15 pounds of wet beet pulp. Alfalfa hay is only about 6 pounds. That's pretty doable, but oil is always my go-to. It's so much more energy dense than anything else, and so a little over 2 measuring cups a day will give you that weight gain. So this is some of you may have seen this before. This is an overview of different oils. It's a comparison of different oils. And so I've got the DAC oil right here up at the top. You can see that they're all got the same fat content. But then what else can you differentiate between these oils? We've talked about the omega-3s and how if you want to feed an oil for high omega-3 fatty acid contents, then forget about the ALA, because that's not going to give you the omega-3s that you need. You want to look at the DHA content. The DAC oil is a blend of different oils and fish oil. And so we have a little DHA in there. We don't market it as an omega-3 fatty acid supplement, but it has significantly more DHA than other supplements that are marketed as an omega-3 fatty acid supplement. Then you want to look at the amount of omega-6 fatty acids, right? Omega-6 fatty acids are pro-inflammatory, and our goal is to keep those down in the diet. And you can see in the DAC oil, we've got about 18% omega-6 fatty acids. But again, in this next line here, 49%. And again, a supplement that claims to be a really high omega fatty acid supplement has close to 54% omega-6 fatty acids, so that's not great. If you go to the next column, you can see we've got a significant amount of natural vitamin E. And then the final column I would draw your attention to always is NASC. Is it NASC certified? And, we're not the only company that's under the NASC banner, but I implore you, whatever supplement you feed, make sure it has that little yellow NASC logo that dictates that, that's an added level of quality control for you. So a lot of people ask me, you know, if I'm feeding a pump of oil, like what does that really equate to? So any of you that have fed the oil, you know it comes with that pump. One pump is 1 ounce. Okay, 1 ounce of oil in one pump. So if we have 3.5 pumps of oil or 3.5 ounces, that's equivalent to about feeding a pound of alfalfa. 4.5 pumps of oil, similar to feeding a pound of beet pulp. 5.5 pumps of oil, that's similar to a pound of oats or rice bran. 7.5 pumps of oil is the same as feeding about a pound of bloom. So you can see, you know, we really don't have to feed much oil to get the same calorie content as a lot of other feed. We've got another drawing, drawing number 8. Our hat winner is Mike Lucy. Email Tina at feeddac.com. We also talked about in November, people, you know, everybody's talking about how to get weight on their horse and what should I feed them over the wintertime to keep them warm. Well, number one, you want to keep your horse warm by feeding him plenty of fiber, because fiber is what creates heat. Those bacteria break down that fiber and they create heat. But we get asked a lot of questions about, you know, kind of the energy or starch content of grains and the safety and efficacy of feeding different grains to horses. And you can see here milo, which is sorghum, corn, wheat, rye, barley, oats. This is starch content. So the energy content of that starch is the energy source. So milo and corn certainly have the highest starch content, therefore energy content, but they're also the least digestible. And oats is actually the safest grain to feed. It's the most digestible. So it may have the least starch, but that makes it safe. But it also is the most digestible. So in order of digestibility, oats are the most digestible, then barley, wheat, sorghum, and corn is actually the least digestible out of all grains. And they have to be processed. Everything other than oats has to be processed before you feed it. So, for all of you that have tuned into this webinar that are going to make an order tomorrow, so I'm going to wrap it up now. I'm going to leave you with, I'm going to ask for questions, but I want to leave this out there. I really challenge you all to make it to DAC Days in 2020. It's on March 13. Mark your calendars. You don't have to be a dealer. You can be an end user. If you want to learn more about DAC products, you want to learn more about DAC in general, then you need to make it to DAC Days. So I've got one more guest that is going to join us, and that is the man himself, Mr. Randy Jacobs. And if I can unmute him, I will let him talk. Take it away, Randy.